What is your name and where do you go to school?
My name is Eleni and I go to Full Sail University.
What are you studying at Full Sail?
I'm currently studying media communications at Full Sail.
What made you decide to go to Full Sail University?
What made me want to go to Full Sail, originally my mom found the school, but she found it for film because I was really interested in video at the time, but I didn't want to go for film because I didn't want to do movies or anything like that. So in one of my classes in high school, I took this like career class where I looked at all these pathways and took all these aptitude tests to figure out what I would want to do. And one of the things that popped up for me was advertising and public relations, and that was what seemed to really interest me. So I started looking for schools that had majors like that or related to it. And so I found Full Sail University again, but this time I found it for media communications. And that's what really sparked my interest. So I had already heard about it through the film degree through my mom, but once I found it for myself in media communications, that's when I actually wanted to start going there. And I really liked the hands-on feel to it and the project-based aspects and the fact that I can get a 4-year degree in only 2 years.
Did you consider any other schools besides Full Sail, or were you like totally set on that one once you found it?
I toured um, Florida Atlantic University, FAU. I toured there. That was the only other school that I toured, but other ones I was looking at online. Like I was considering Penn State University and Westchester University near my hometown. But I only applied to Full Sail because I knew that after looking through everything, that's the only one that I actually wanted to go to. So once I got in there, that's the only thing I wanted to do.
You mentioned your hometown. Where are you from?
I'm from Downingtown, Pennsylvania.
Was moving all the way to Full Sail, which is in Florida, a big deal for you?
Moving for um so moving to Florida from Pennsylvania was definitely a big move and probably one of the scariest things I've ever had to do, but it honestly wasn't that scary at the time, which is like sounds kind of weird, but I had been talking to this girl who goes to Full Sail or did at the time. So we kind of became like internet friends and decided on rooming together. So I hadn't actually met her before, but at least I knew somebody and wasn't completely on my own. And she had been down here for a year before me. So I kind of had someone who knew the area. We ended up getting along really well in the beginning. So my apartment just felt like a little family, me and my two other roommates. And that honestly made the move so much better. Met this group of friends that just made Florida feel like home. So that made the move a lot easier because if I didn't have that, I think it would be really sad. But I definitely did cry while leaving my hometown and leaving all my friends and family.
What do you enjoy most about school?
What I enjoy most about school and about Full Sail is honestly the teachers that we have because a lot of my teachers I consider mentors, and I know that I can go to them with anything, whether it be either career related or even not career related and just something personal. Because a lot of them I've connected with on a deeper level and had deeper conversations with, and I just know I can go to them for anything if I need help advancing to like a new spot in my career or want to find like a job or internship or just new connections or how to do something new. I know I can count on them to help me get to that next level as long as they know that I'm willing to put in the work. So the connections that I made from the school are honestly my favorite part, and the fact that there's a lot of people here who are creative and will jump on ideas with you and just help you bring them to life because that's not something you find in a lot of places, I feel like. So just coming here into that creative environment is my favorite part.
That's pretty cool. So that was obviously what you most enjoy about school. What was your biggest struggle with school before we went on the line?
Ooh, that's a hard one. My biggest struggle with school before going online would probably be sitting through long classes of classes that didn't interest me. Like I love like anything visual arts. Like I love graphic design. I'm interested in learning about more in marketing. Um, and I do love making videos, even though I've kind of decided that that's not the path that I want to take, but I still love making them for myself and just to push myself. But classes like art history, for example, and sitting through those really long lectures of things that I just could not stay focused on or interested in at all, that was the hardest thing for me. Just sitting through the ones that I knew I was not interested in and knew I wouldn't really get much from was a struggle because I had to be there and I had to be sitting through it. But but yeah, just staying interested in those. Oh well.
Um, what, so you obviously have taken a lot of classes that you have enjoyed. What do you think if you had to pick one or two things that you've taken away from those classes so far that you have enjoyed? What were those two, one or two things to be like your biggest takeaways, like that you've learned?
Hmm. My biggest takeaways that I've learned through the classes that I've enjoyed are that you don't have to be perfect. Like you're here to learn. So it's okay that the work's not your best as long as you're trying your hardest and you're willing to go back and willing to fix things and willing to do better and put in the extra work and seek out the help. Like, for example, one of my favorite classes was the graphic design and communications class because I actually got to work on almost like a real world project with branding a company. And so some of those things I had never done before, but were really interesting. And I remember talking to Jolena and having her talk to us about her client work and her freelance work and how she goes about talking to her clients, how she sends them the examples and work that she's done, and really just her process. And that I learned a lot from because it's not just something you do for school for a grade, it's something that if this is what you're interested in, you'll be doing down the line. So seeing like real world, seeing that insight, because I feel like you don't get a lot of insight from what other designers do, what other people do. And so being able to see that from a first person perspective was super helpful. So yeah, I would say that like not being afraid to have things that aren't perfect yet, because that's a necessary part of growth, and also to have real world people show you things that you don't see in normal classes.
Cool. So you shared your biggest struggle before going online, and then one of the things that you've gotten to take away from being in school. What has been your biggest struggle about doing school online now, since we've just switched kind of to everything being online since COVID has hit?
My biggest struggle with switching everything to online has been keeping my motivation up because I am a self-motivated person, but I also love the energy of other people and other creatives, and being around that energy just inspires me so much to start new projects and come up with new ideas, and not being able to be around those people has definitely made a miserable impact. Yeah, I don't want to say miserable impact, but it's something that I miss a lot, and it's been a struggle.
How do you think school going remote has changed things for you and your learning? Or, like, have you had to adapt to a new learning style? Or, like, what steps have you taken?
I think that there have been phases when it comes to me adapting my learning because of COVID and moving everything online. Because at first there was a phase of me taking the opportunity to really learn a lot on Photoshop. Like before COVID hit, I really didn't know anything in Photoshop. And now that's like one of the main things that I use in design and have become really comfortable with it. So in the beginning, I was really thankful for the time to be able to just sit down and learn this new program. So not only Photoshop, but also Illustrator and InDesign and all of that. And so at first I was really motivated and didn't really need an outside influence, and I could just learn through like YouTube or anyone who knew how to do it. But so that at first was really fun, and then it kind of, there's been like another stage, I guess, where I learned that I really enjoy learning in person. You know, if it's something that isn't program based, if it's like a marketing class or something like that, or if it's collaborative, I really enjoy being in person. I think it's helpful that I can now say that I'm able to work remote, like working the writing conference, like designing everything for them online is beneficial because now I can show employers that I'm able to brand for something completely remotely and communicate completely remotely and still be really successful in the work that I create. So I think that's super beneficial, but I do miss the human connection and I think that I learn better that way.
How do you think that remote learning affects the future of students?
I think remote learning affects the future of students by one, preparing them to be able to adapt to anything because going from something that's completely in person to something that's completely online is a huge change, especially when you're isolated, when you can't even see people in like groups of more than 10 or you can't go anywhere without like a mask on. You have to be super careful of who you're in contact with. I think that being able to adapt to something like that in a work standpoint is super important to be able to do, especially moving forward in the workforce. Like, this is something that's probably going to stick around for a little bit, so I think it's important to know how to do. But I also think it affects a lot of students' learnings because I've noticed a lot less of an attendance in classes and there's just a lot of people who aren't motivated in group projects and people who are just being lazy and not even, you know, some people it's not even intentional. It's just the fact that they're very unmotivated with everything going on.
How do you think that, well, do you think that the pandemic is a way that has kind of, I guess, like influence people to learn more about themselves and how they learn? Or like, do you think that some people are just unmotivated to begin with? Or do you think that like the pandemic has really brought out kind of the worst in some people in their learning?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has shown a lot of people how they learn. I think it's a mix between people who are just genuinely unmotivated and people who just can sometimes struggle to find that motivation. And I think honestly, everybody has times like that where they struggle to find motivation. I don't know one person that's just motivated 24/7. But it's definitely shown me how I work and how I learn. I've learned so much more about myself through this because I've had to spend a lot more time alone and just with myself. So I've been getting to know myself more and how I work and how I learn. And I think a lot of other people are too. And I don't think that there's one thing that you can say as a generalization for how people learn because I think everyone's different, but I do think everyone's learning more about it and how they work.
How do you think the pandemic has influenced people's day to day lives the most?
I think the pandemic has influenced everyone's day to day lives the most in the sense that I want to say motivation is a huge factor in the sense that people are a lot less motivated now. But I think it's affected them a lot more, like learning how to be alone, I guess, because at first we didn't even have a choice of whether or not we were like in a group of people or alone. Um, can you say the question again? I kind of forgot what I was talking about.
How do you think the pandemic has influenced people's day to day lives the most?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has influenced everyone's lives the most by forcing them to get to know the people that are directly around them and to know themselves and to be able to adapt because this is something that nobody was expecting and now everyone has to change.
How do you think how has the pandemic influenced your day to day life directly since it started? Or differently since it started?
The pandemic has changed my life because I spend a lot more time with myself. I have to really find motivation within myself because I'm not surrounded by other people, and I love getting energy from other people. I love when there's a really creative environment with others because that helps me be creative and pushes me to do new awesome things. And now that that's been taken away, I really have to find what makes me tick and what motivates me when I'm alone and when I can't get energy from anyone else.
What is your stance on the idea of everyone getting the vaccine to prevent the spread and stop the virus?
Where I stand on the vaccine is that, I feel like it's very complicated because I know that there's going to be a lot of people who don't want it or will try to refuse to get it. But I think there's a lot of people that will get it just because they want things to go back to normal. And honestly, like, I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I'm okay with getting it now because I just want things to go back to normal. But in the beginning, I was like skeptical about it and, didn't want it. And so I think that it's going to be very hard to get everyone to take it, which is understandable completely. But I just don't know how things are going to turn out in terms of who gets to do what and how things are going to go back to a new normal. And how we're going to be able to go back in person, because if not everyone's doing the same thing, I feel like there's going to be a lot of complications and take a lot more time to figure out.
Do you think that it's everyone's right to decide whether they get the vaccine, or do you think it should be a mandatory thing that ends up everybody getting so we can just go back to or figure out a new normal?
I believe it should be a choice whether or not you get the vaccine, because that goes with a lot of them, where you are able to choose and it is your body. However, I do think that there will be a lot of restrictions for people who choose not to get it. And I think there's going to be a lot of controversy over that. But I think that just with everything going on, I don't really know what else the country would do, in a sense. Like, I know that it's a super difficult decision, but at the same time, I don't really see what an alternative would be, because someone's going to be mad either way.
Yeah, someone's always mad. Speaking of being mad and mental health issues, what do you think the relation between mental health issues and the pandemic is?
Oh, the relationship between mental health and the pandemic, I think, goes hand in hand because, people who are already dealing with mental health issues like isolation is making it a lot worse for people. And I've seen it firsthand. Like, when I went to go home, um, I noticed that, like, my best friend, I only saw her, and this was like once people were able to hang out again and in small groups and everything. But she's fine. Like, she doesn't have like a lot of mental health issues, but she developed this sort of anxiety that she didn't even know was happening. But anytime, like, she was just throwing up a lot and didn't know why, and it was because of anxiety, not because of anything else, but the fact that she hasn't been able to go and see anyone outside of her family for months, and the thought of just doing that made her really anxious. And I think that for someone who doesn't even have like bad mental health issues, for that to happen to, I think the people, like, everyone has mental health issues, and on some level everyone has taken care of the mental health, and I think that isolation is making it a lot worse or a lot harder to deal with, and the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to get.
Obviously, there's mental health issues that are going along, but I do feel like there are some people that have made it a positive experience because that's just what you have to do when things aren't good. If you choose to dwell on the bad, it's only going to get worse. So, what is the most positive thing you feel like you've learned or taken away throughout the pandemic?
The most positive thing I've learned throughout the pandemic is that if you choose to use your time wisely, it can really benefit you, because there have been points throughout this pandemic where I've really focused on myself career wise and getting a lot of work done, and that's pushed me a lot farther. Like when I look back through this year, I look at all the things that I've done and realize that, wow, like even though we were in a pandemic, I've done a lot. And, you know, compared to some other people who can't say that, who have just been like lazy because of it, I think it can be a very beneficial thing and can jumpstart you and push you a lot farther than you could have been without the pandemic. So I think that's very powerful. But I definitely think it does come in waves, and it's hard to be like that all the time. But I think if you really put your mind to it and are able to control your thoughts, then it can benefit you.
That's a good answer. And then just the last question is, what is your hope moving forward for life as we hopefully come to the end of this pandemic soon?
My hope for life as we hopefully come to the end of this pandemic is that obviously I want everything to go back to normal, and I highly doubt it's going to be back to normal, but I miss meeting people and being able to see people and hug people and not worry about this virus. But the most, like, the biggest thing for me right now is the job search, because I'm going to be graduating soon, and having all jobs be remote or having a lot less jobs because of money reasons is really stressful. So I'm hoping that this all ends and that jobs open up and that, you know, I'm able to actually survive on my own with this, with COVID being a thing, making it 10 times harder for people to find jobs. It's just a weird time for that.
Perfect. All right, that's all my questions.
All
But
right.
that's honestly so true. I didn't even think about that, like the fact that like if you can't get a job, like what do you do? Because
Exactly.
like we're like you'd almost, for people like us, you almost have to move back home like with your parent, cuz like if you don't have a job,
Yeah. I feel
unless
like
you
it's
get
better now, but like people in March, I feel really bad for like people graduating in March and all that. Like when it first started, when like everything was shut down, that's just rough. But yeah.
that's